So hello everyone, and welcome along to this live webinar. And today we have a special guest, Ahmed Khan, with Ask Me Anything session. So Ahmed, basically it's a freestyle webinar, and we'll start with an introduction, and then we will start taking some questions, and perhaps I will ask also some, if that's okay. Um, Mainly about your journey, about some tips in terms of how to invest in properties. Or for the people who joined, feel free to ask your question on the chat, and we also let you raise your hand and ask it out loud at some point. So perhaps, Ahmed, we can start with brief introduction about yourself, about your journey, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. Thank you for having me. So I, like most people, went to university in 2013. I mean, most people didn't go in 2013, but most people have that trajectory. I studied economics for 3 years, and the aim really was just to get some sort of corporate job, really, whether it was in banking, consultancy, accounting, something along those lines. And so in my 3 years of being at university, you apply for spring internships and summer internships and graduate schemes and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, I didn't get it. I didn't manage to get a single one of those. So I didn't really convert to a job by the time I finished university. And I applied to more than 30 different internships and jobs and stuff. And so because that didn't convert, I partly gave up hope and partly gave myself, like 12 months to see if I could do something else with my time as opposed to just having a job. And so finished university in September of 2016, started looking for other ideas in terms of, well, what sort of business could I make work? I tried a few different things. They didn't quite pan out. And then I discovered the world of property. And the first thing I did was, what is now known as rent to serviced accommodation. So I was essentially renting, studio flats, one bedrooms, two bedrooms. Then I would put them onto Airbnb, booking.com, and essentially charge a much higher price than what I was paying, to landlords. And so did that for a couple of years, saved up a bit of money from that business, and then I started buying properties. And the first one I bought was a one-bedroom flat in Battersea in London for 237,000. I bought that as a one bed, very quickly, turned that into a two-bedroom property. So converted it from a one into a two, refinanced, got the bulk of my money back on the refinance, used that money to then buy the next one, the next one, the next one. So I did that quite a few times. And then I transitioned into buying houses, which I could then turn into flats. So bought a house which I turned into two flats and four flats. Right now I'm doing one which is five flats. And so it's just been a slow, gradual build up of, starting from rental properties to one beds to, a slightly bigger house and a bigger house and a bigger house. And yeah, hopefully I can, continue that trajectory really. But that's sort of the quick bio.
And if you can emphasize again why property, because basically you could have chosen like any other you know investment channel. It can be stocks, crypto. Like if you can perhaps highlight more why this specifically.
Uh, I tried to create an app before this, and I tried to do something else which is quite different from that as well. And I think the thing with property is that there is a bit of a proven pathway. So if someone else has done a deal before, by they've done a rent to rent deal or they've converted a one bedroom into a two bedroom, it's a bit more proven and it's a bit more something you can replicate because the process is largely exactly the same. Now, if you're building an app, yes, there might be some processes involved which might be similar, but there's no real guarantee that that's going to pay off because each app is very different and the way you market it is going to be very different. The customer base is going to be very different. Whereas you don't really tend to get that as much with property investing. With property investing, it's as long as someone has done that and they have detailed the process. Yes, there might be subtle, small variations here and there, but largely it's the same. So I did a lot of one bedrooms into two bedrooms. I did one around the Vauxhall area. Right now, I'm mentoring someone and they're doing one pretty much down the road in the Kennington Oval area. And it's the same process, it's the same forms, it's the same, brokers, solicitors, and so on and so forth. So I just felt that as an entry level business, whether you get into buying properties or whether you get into rent to rent, I just felt as an entry level business, it was the easiest to make work in the grand scheme of things. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's just, if you want to, I don't know, open up an app or something, that's going to be significantly harder in my opinion, because of the skill set required. So I just felt it required the least amount of skill when you're starting out.
Yeah, makes sense. And I totally agree. Like to start, perhaps, like a startup or like a tech venture or anything else is like require perhaps, larger team, more resources, different skill sets, etc. And if we speak about property, what is your uh, main strategy? Would you go with buy to let or buy to sell, like in a high level? Would you prefer, to keep the property, start building a portfolio with ongoing income and cash flow, rather than, projects that, you buy the property, you have a plan how to convert it to something else or how to perform a renovation and then basically sell at a higher value for profit? What is your base, would be like your
Yeah,
best?
it's kind of somewhere in the middle. I think, a basic buy to let is you're just buying and renting something out, and the opposite of that is you're buying to sell, so you're flipping. Now, I don't I'm not a huge fan of pure, in a simplest form, the simplest buy to let strategy, whereby you just buy and rent, because it's very hard to make a huge margin on something like that. At the same time, I'm not a huge fan of selling properties because, well, especially being in the UK, one thing you want to capitalize on is the capital appreciation, depending on your location. And so if you buy and you find a property and you do it up and you get rid of it once you've sold it, well, you don't really benefit from any future appreciation. So I do, what is known as buy, refurb, refinance, i.e., I'll try to buy something, add a lot of value to it, and then refinance it and try to get as much money back as possible, because then I can use those funds in order to buy, the next one, the next one, the next one. So I suppose it's somewhere in the middle. Technically, by the time I rent the property out, it is a buy to let, in the sense that, it's got a buy to let mortgage on there. So yeah, the rental aspect, I do rent them out as opposed to sell them. But before I get to the stage of renting them out, I want to make sure I've bought it at a good price. I've added a lot of value. I've got a lot of my money back in order to just keep that ticking along.
Yeah, makes sense. What about areas? Like, would you select this like a specific area that you get, expertise in this area, all the statistics, actually the property types, the rental options, etc. Or, you can basically invest based on the opportunity all around the UK, let's say.
So the way I think about areas, I work backwards from strategy. So, for example, I'll give you an example. I like I said, I started off by converting one bedroom flats into two bedroom flats, and then recently I moved into turning houses into flats, right? So now, if my strategy is turning a one bed flat into a two bed flat, and I look at where I live, which is in Stevenage in Hertfordshire, if I look at that area doesn't have any old flats. It's predominantly housing, and all the flats are modern flats, and they're too small, and you can't convert them, right? So Stevenage as an area doesn't work for that strategy.
Right.
But for houses into flat strategy, it works really well because it has a ton of houses with, ideal layouts which could be converted into two flats, three flats, four flats. So the way I personally like to think about it is that I look at my strategy first. And then, so once I've got my strategy, let's say, the one bed into a two bed, I then write down, what does the property need to look like for me to be able to turn it from a one bed into a two bed. So, for example, with a one bed, it has to have a separate kitchen. The kitchen has to have a window. The kitchen has to be 8 square meters. So it's almost like I've got a list. It's almost like, you have like a list of ingredients before you go to like a supermarket or something. Like, exactly what you're looking for. And so then when you look at an area, it has those characteristics, or it doesn't have those characteristics. Same with a shop, I suppose. If you have a list of ingredients, and that shop either has those or it doesn't have those. I don't, you know, I suppose, because I've mainly invested in London and I mainly invested in Stevenage, where I live, and I know the area well, and I know the rental market works well. So I never really had to pay attention to the rental market and appreciation figures and so on and so forth. Whereas if I was, I don't know, looking at an area which was completely unknown to me, I probably would have a look at those. It's just historically I haven't, because I've known the areas, luckily. But I think most places in the UK you're probably fine, because it is a tiny island at the end of the day, and I think over time prices and rents will only go up and up and up. I think it's just a case of making like, for example, if you're doing the one bed into a two bed strategy and you're looking at flats, well, it would help to be in areas which maybe are commuter towns, and the properties are closer to the town centers and so on and so forth. You wouldn't want a flat in the middle of nowhere, really far from stations, because that doesn't really appeal to people who are looking at flats. Whereas if it's houses, then you could be further out and you don't have to be a commuter town. I mean, a three-bedroom house is very, very common, right? For most people to live in or most people to rent. So yeah, people should probably look at that. But I've been fortunate enough to know my areas well enough, so I haven't. But yeah, I normally tend to look at the strategy first and then the area.
And Ahmed, if you don't know, what would you do? Like basically you will like research online, like you will use, your contacts network, or what are basically the ways you can, obtain data about a property, about area.
Yeah, like if I wasn't sure at all, then I would be looking at, for example, past data in terms of how much property prices have appreciated, how much the rents have appreciated, the proximity of, for example, the property to schools, to stations, how busy those stations are. I believe if you go into the landlord panel and you put in a postcode, you get a whole ton of data in terms of crime and so on and so forth. So you would look at all of that. But for me, if I was looking at somewhere in the south, I would probably just be looking at how much prices appreciated, how much rents appreciated, and depending on the type of property, how close am I to schools and how close am I to stations. I think, especially for flat, stations tends to be a big one, purely because those people generally, if someone has a flat, there's a high likelihood they don't have a car, and if they don't have a car, then public transport becomes a key factor there. Whereas if it was a house, you would expect people generally to have a car, and it wouldn't really matter as much that is it close to a station or not. And so if it was a house, I would probably be limited to how the capital appreciation and the rental appreciation.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense. All right. So I have a few more questions, but like for the audience here, if you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand or just write your question in the chat. When you write the question, make sure you target everyone. There's a bug, so I can't see all of your names here, but I will let you introduce yourself before you ask the question. So yeah, so feel free to write your questions, and in the meantime, we will continue. So Ahmed, like I have a few questions about property sourcing, because we get many questions from users. So we have on Landlord, the option to source properties based on APIs and things like that. But it's interesting for me, like what other ways there are to find the right properties to buy, at the right price at the right time. What is your strategy? What is the way that you get the opportunities?
Yeah, to be honest, I've always looked in the open market, and I've always got properties from just the open market, as opposed to doing leaflets or doing something along those lines. I think what it is um it's not so much so that you need a secret website or some special way of I don't know, finding deals and leaflets and so on and so forth. I think it's a case of being able to spot an opportunity and differentiating yourself from everyone else. So I'll give you an example. So the one bedroom flats into two bedroom flats that I was buying, and I'll give you two examples. I'll share my screen for the second one.
Yeah. So
The one bedroom flat I was buying, to turn into two bedroom flats. Most people would look at that and they would say, well, there's a one bedroom property, it's in terrible condition, the kitchen's falling apart, the bathroom's falling apart. Keep in mind this is a right move. And they would say, well, maybe I can do a refurb and put a new kitchen in, new bathroom in, and so on and so forth. And that would add value, but it would only add so much value. But I went in with the intention of, well, not only am I going to do a refurb, I'm also going to add a second bedroom. And so because I'm seeing it slightly differently, it almost doesn't matter that it's on Rightmove or it's not on Rightmove, because you have to come up with a way of adding value which other people are not seeing, and most people are not really thinking that it could be turned into, you know, a two-bedroom property. And so if I give you a very similar example, let
Yep.
me just share my screen 1 second. So here we go. This is, can you see my screen now?
Yeah. Okay.
So this is a house I bought recently, and this is a 3-bedroom detached house, right? Now, this was in Rightmove, and this kind of like proves my point about like you don't need some special portal. It's just about understanding how to add value, which other people are not seeing. Now, this is a 3-bedroom house. I don't have the interior pictures, I believe. No, but I've just got these outside pictures, so you can see it from different angles, right? Now, most people would look at something like this and they would say, well, you know, maybe I could, I don't know, do a rear extension and turn into a 5-bedroom house, or maybe I can do a side extension and turn into a 5-bedroom house. Or maybe someone could say, well, actually, maybe I can put up 2 houses, one here and one here. So then I'll have 2 houses, and so on and so forth. Now, we looked at this and we said, well, what if we do a huge rear extension, side extension, and then we convert it into 5 flats? And then in the end, we go planning for 5 flats. So, but you know, we knew what the policies were, what the planners would allow, what they would not allow, and you know, we could work out where the potential was of this site. Now, if someone hasn't done their research and isn't aware of planning permission and how it works and how to add value, well, they would always just appraise it as maybe I can do a side extension and turn into a 5-bed house, but a 5-bed house is not going to make that much money. So what happens is then they start looking at off-market deals. So they start, you know, doing leaflets and so on and so forth, trying to find an amazing 3-bedroom house at a huge bargain, which they can turn into a 5-bedroom house. But I just think that's the wrong way of thinking about it. Like, if you can't make any property work on Rightmove, then most likely the way you're adding value just isn't that much. I'm not saying Rightmove necessarily has the best deals, but you should be able to make something work. You should be able to make the odd property work. And so if you find a better way of adding value, which no one else is saying, it doesn't matter if it's in Rightmove or not. It could be anywhere, and you know, it will make money. It's almost like I just came back from Dubai a few days ago, and it's almost like if 20 years ago there was, I don't know, any piece of land there, it could be on the website, it could be on, you know, it could be right in front of you. If you knew Dubai was going to become what it became, you don't have to do any special leafleting. Like you can just buy whatever was advertised in front of you. It's just because you knew how to add value. So I think the most important thing is figure out how to add value, and then, you know, use platforms and tools in order to I go through as many leads as possible until, you know, you find some which stick. I just don't think you need some special technique, because most likely if it doesn't work in Rightmove, you know, another example, a property down the road from me, 3-4 weeks ago, they sent me a letter that they were looking to sell the property, and they were trying to sell it off market. So now I had this off market lead, you know, which is what everyone wants, but the numbers just didn't work. Like it just had no margin. You couldn't add value to it. It was just one of those properties, because of the layout and because of the plot and everything else. It was almost impossible to add any value to it. Now it's off market, but it doesn't mean just because it's off market by default, you know, it's the most amazing thing in the world. So off market is fine, Rightmove is fine, as long as you know how to do something to it. I think you're on mute.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Ahmed. So we have several questions. And again, like if you want to ask questions, raise your hand or just write your question on the chat. So we don't have the names. So if you can introduce yourself by name before. So the first question, how do you work out the future value of a property prior to adding an extra room or converting a house to flats? So basically speaking about like how you assess the GDV post refurbishment.
So you have to think about it from a valuer's point of view. So when you buy a property, you send a valuer in there and they value the property. And when you know, add the value and you're selling it or you're refinancing it, again, you know, send a valuer in there who values it. Now, we can come up with our own ways of valuing your property and what we believe is right and what we believe is fair and so on and so forth. But that almost doesn't matter. It's whatever the valuer thinks and whatever the valuer's methodology is. And so if you look at pretty much any valuation report, it generally tends to say that, you have your property, which is the flat or the house or whatever, and they compare it to properties sold in the area. And when I say area, I mean normally in a half a mile radius, and then sold within the last 12 months. So look at all the properties sold in the last 12 months, draw a circle, which is a half mile radius, and then you will get a bunch of properties. Now, from there, you need to sift through and find the ones which are the most similar to yours. So, for example, if you're buying an ex-council flat, well, then the ones which are sold, you need to sift through and find the ones which are ex-council. If yours is a 2-bedroom, then it has to be a 2-bedroom. If yours is 50 square meters, that has to be close to 50 square meters. It might be 48, it might be 53, but it can't be 82, right? Like that's too different to the stuff that you're looking at. So you write down all the characteristics of your property, and then when you're sifting through that circle you drew, you find the ones which are the most similar to yours. Now, you might end up with 4 properties which are very close to your one. And then from those 4, you rank them. You rank them 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 being the most similar. And there is some subjectivity there because, well, what is the most similar? Is the closest one the most similar? Is the one with the same size the most similar? It is a bit difficult. But depending on the area, I would normally say the one which is the closest is the most similar, especially if you're in a big city like London. Because with London, what happens is if you draw half a mile radius, that could the half a mile radius, depending on where you are, could be the difference between Oxford Street and like almost like Kilburn or something. Maybe Kilburn's a bit further, but it's like half a mile in London is a huge distance. Like you can go from a very expensive location to a very cheap location in half a mile, and of course the surveyor is not gonna compare a cheap property to a very expensive property. So whereas if you're in Stevenage, which is a small town in the UK, half a mile, it doesn't really change that much. Whatever is on one side is pretty much the same on the other side. There isn't as much fluctuation. So you have to use a bit of common sense from that point of view, that if your property is in a very expensive area, then compare it to the expensive area. If it's in a cheap area, compare it to the cheap area. Don't, just because it's in half of a mile circle, you can't just say, well, it's a circle and therefore it's done. And so draw the circle, filter by the last 12 months, and then filter by the characteristics. And hopefully you will end up with 1 or 2 properties which are very, very similar to yours. And then you rank them 1, 2, 3, 4 based on whichever the one is the most similar. And then you go with number 1. That's how I tend to do it. Every single valuation report I've read, that is what they tend to do. They don't look at the top 3 or 4 comparables and take an average or take a median or take a modal, or that's what my experience has been. They generally seem to rank them from 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it's not exactly the same as number 1. It might be slightly more, it might be slightly less, but you're trying to find properties which are as close as possible to your one, and then you use that as a reference point.
Great question, and I will add to that, Ahmed, that users that they have access to the premium plan, they enjoy like unlimited property value estimation. So what we do is basically we use property data. So can you see the screen of the deal analyzer?
Yeah.
If you go but stuck for me now. Let me just refresh again. So the way it works, basically, you need to put the postcode and then some parameters. And then based on the historical data in this postcode, the engine will calculate the potential return. Yeah, I see I have some issues with my account right now. Okay, I will show it after that. I will not waste the time now, but I will show you how we can do it. There are other questions. Another one, when you are looking to convert house into flats, what's the minimum square foot do you look for?
Yeah. So everyone can do this. You can Google something called the National Space Standards. And when you Google the National Space Standards, on one side, it will have all the bedrooms. So for example, a 1-bedroom property, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom. And then on the top, in the columns, it will tell you the number of stories So is it a one-story property? Is it two-story property, three-story property, four-story property? It maybe doesn't go up to four, maybe it goes up to three. I can't remember exactly. So you have the bedrooms, you have the stories, and then you basically have a table. And so, for example, the smallest a one-bedroom flat can be is 37 square meters. So if you're turning a house into two flats, you have to have 37 upstairs and 37 downstairs. You'll also lose a bit of area because of the communal space and everything else. So maybe let's just round it to 40 and 40. And so therefore the house has to be at least 80. If you want to do three flats, well, then it's 40, 40, 40, which is 120, and so on and so forth. That's on the basis of, small one-bedroom flats. Now, if you wanted to do two-bedroom flats, I think from memory, the minimum is 61 square meters. And so for your two-bedroom flats would be 61, 61, 61, which is 183, a bit of area for the communal area. So, you're looking at 190, 195. So it depends on what you're trying to build and how much space the property already has in order to accommodate that.
All right. Thanks, Ahmed. Now I was able to launch it. Okay, so just like for the previous question about GDV, so on the deal analyzer, you have the get estimation link. So here, based on what's called the property type, the construction date, internal area, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, and then you need to put also the internal finish quality. I don't know why when I present it's now stuck, but basically you have several options there. It can be average or a low. Then how many outdoor space, and if there are off-street parking spaces. Based on that, and based on all the data points, the engine will calculate the estimated property value, and you can change. So if it's now will be 3 bedrooms in this postcode with these parameters, what should be the value? This is an indication. It's not 100% accurate. It's not like you say, like there is a surveyor that inspect the property, but it's definitely indication about the prices in this area for this type of properties. So it's like, I think something that you can do like to support your decision. And on the premium plan, you have unlimited property value estimations. All right. So we have more questions that were targeted to hosts and panelists. If you ask questions, just make sure that you target everyone. Hi guys, Ade here. What's the right size a kitchen has to be in a 1-bedroom flat for it to be acceptable to be converted to a room?
Yeah, so I think acceptable is a key word here because there aren't any specific guidelines which say, well, a room has to be this big. I've seen room guidelines, but they generally tend to be for HMOs as opposed to, for normal residential properties. And so acceptable, I suppose, is a case of, well, firstly, are you turning into a single room or are you turning into a double room? Yeah, and then second, can you have a layout in a way which fits everything in? So for example, the smallest I've done is 5.2 square meters. I probably wouldn't recommend that. I think that's definitely on the smaller side. It was my first deal, and I learned quite a lot from that, but I think that was definitely a bit too on the small side. Now I've done 6.4, I've done 8, I've done 7 square meters. I would generally say that if you're 7 plus, 7, 8 plus, then you're definitely on the easier side of this, and it definitely makes it easier. But that's not to say that if it was 6.7, you can't do it. Now, like I said, I've never seen any specifications which say that a room has to be bigger than a certain size, and so therefore, technically, if you can fit a single bed in there, if fit a wardrobe in there and a side table in there, well, and everything fits and everything works, well, I guess that's acceptable to whoever's renting it and whoever's living there, and as long as there's space to move around and everything else. So if you look at a lot of new build properties, they have what is known as the box room, which is basically a small single room. I wonder how big that is. Maybe around 6 square meters. I'm not entirely sure how big those box rooms are, but 7, I would say 7 plus, you're generally on the safe. 7, 8 plus, you're generally on this safe end of the spectrum.
All right, thanks, Ahmed. Another question, what is the best way to estimate rental values?
Yeah, rental values, you know, you can do a similar thing to the GDV values, which is again, you'll for example, if you go into, you know, any tool, and you can use, you know, even Rightmove for this, you put in your postcode and there's a box in Rightmove which says include properties which are already let out. And then you just, for example, if you've got a one bedroom flat, you search one bedroom flat, include the properties which are let out, find the ones, you know, which have been let out recently in very similar condition to yours, and are a very similar type of property to yours. So if you have a one bedroom 50 square meter ex council property, well then you find a one bedroom 50 square meter ex council property. Like I said, it doesn't have to be exactly 50 square meters. It might be bigger, it might be smaller, but the closest one you can, you see what it was rented out for, and then that is the figure you take.
Yeah, and you can also do like as you said, like for like on landlord, you can do the rental estimation, and it will provide you with a rough number about the rental prices in this area based on the parameters that you put in this pop-up. While I'm here, let me see. I don't know, it doesn't let me share, like do any operation when I share the screen. Let's try again. So I mean, I want like people just to see where they can, if they want to get more advice from you. So on your landlord account, invest experts, you can find the page of Ahmed that you can. I need to.
I started my property business in September of 2016. I
This is
started by
me,
renting
one
properties
second.
and then subletting them onto Airbnb, booking.
Yeah, I will share it again. Sorry, I have some technical issues. All right, yeah. So here you can click on book a meeting, and then you have three options. You know, if you want more time with Ahmed to get more tips, or I don't know, I mean, if you want to describe like what else people can get out of those one-on-one sessions.
Yeah, you know, generally when it comes to one-on-one sessions, it falls into two camps. So the first camp are people who are looking to get started in property and are trying to work out, well, what is the best strategy for me? So, you know, for example, like I said, I did Airbnb, I did one beds into two beds, I did house into flats. And I feel like for most people, the hardest part of the equation is just trying to work out, well, what do I need to do for me? What's the right strategy for me? What's the game plan for me? So one of the things we do in the 1 hour session is we essentially create, you know, almost like a one-page business plan, like a strategy, which you can deploy depending on your area, your level of expertise, your level of finance, how much time you have, and so on and so forth. So that's what a lot of people use it for. And then the second methodology, or the second way people use these sessions, is that if they're working on specific properties, right? So someone might have found a one bedroom flat, which they want to convert it into a two bedroom flat, and they want me to look at the numbers for them, look at if it will get, you know, permission, if it won't get permission, how to finance it. So basically very specific about specific deals. Hence, you know, this is in the deal analysis tab. So yeah, if either you fit into the camp whereby you are right at the start and you're not sure how to start, or if you know how to start, but now you're stuck on analyzing deal to make sure the numbers are okay, and if it actually has a good margin, and the best way of financing it, and the best way to get permissions, and so on and so forth, then, you know, you can also, you know, book one of these sessions.
Yeah, very highly recommended, and feel free to do it from the app, or also, I mean, you can share perhaps your YouTube channel where people can get, you know, great content about your journey and about, you know, property in general, property investing. And Sarel will share the links to schedule demos or to schedule calls with our team. Sarel, if you can just directly to everyone, not just to hosts and
Yeah,
panelists.
I'll just share my screen. So this is my YouTube channel, and if anyone wants, you know, more information, I've got especially this main video here. This is an 11-hour course I've created on property investing, and so that will give you the A to Z of how to start buying one bedroom flats and converting them into two bedroom flats. Then I've got a 7-hour Airbnb course. I've got a 10-hour Airbnb course, and I believe I've got another one here somewhere, which is a 4-hour course. which for some reason I'm not seeing. Oh, it's here. Sorry, it's here. And then I've got a 3 hours and 41-minute course, which again goes through property investing. So that would be the main place if you just want, detailed knowledge about how to start investing. Check out their YouTube channel and go from there.
Amazing. Okay, so thank you very much, Ahmed, for joining. It was great as always, and thanks everyone. We will upload it to our YouTube as an unlisted video shared only with our premium users. So feel free to reach out. You have the link to Landlord if you want to schedule some calls with the team. Yeah, thanks again. Thanks, Ahmed, and have a great rest of the weekend.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and hopefully everyone found that useful. And yeah, we'll look to do another one potentially soon.
Yeah, hopefully. Thank you
Brilliant.
very much.
Thanks again, guys. Bye. Bye.